super important. There's a question here from.
Okay, this take too long. We got other stuff to watch. We got Asmongold to get mad at. Uh-oh. What is this?
They had me back. Maybe that's what it was. Yeah, DEI administration, let's go. Yeah, sorry, guys. We'll try to invade you as soon as possible, okay? It might take us a little while to, to come up with a justification, but we'll figure it out. Yeah, why you look like Bush, though? Does he look like Bush? I see what you mean, but not really. And, let's see, what's this?
Lots of media.
Friendly media.
No, I do. No, God, no.
The ones that are here invited.
Look, I'm doing no media at this one.
Can we sit down and I'll make a time with you and
We can't see. Wait, could you not see that entire time? What the f, guys?
answer some actual tough questions?
You can make a request for a meeting, and
So you can deny it.
Oh.
I never do.
I understand. My one question is, can the Canadian oil and gas sector survive the net zero approach that's being promoted here?
As I said, I never do. If you want to interview with me, like everybody else, you make a request and we can have an interview.
And will you accept that?
Like everybody else, if I can fit it in, okay?
How do you justify how does the UN climate envoy justify the massive carbon footprint here today? To set this up,
I'm sorry, not Russian. Rebel News, Russian News, same thing, I guess, is super far right Canadian outlet, by the way.
this fake city for a week event. How did you?
He's not really that popular.
Did you fly?
I'm seeing that.
You walked? Yeah. Did you come on a private jet?
Of course not.
No, so how do you justify this? Look at all of this. For 1 week event, the carbon footprint is huge. Don't you think that's a bit hypocritical?
There's no way that Asmongold is going to say anything about this when Trump has been flying all over the fucking world with random shit and having his Secret Service people everywhere and like going back and forth for his golfing and all this autistic, and Elon Musk getting security and all this autistic shit, right? There's no way, right?
Drop it.
No?
Drop it.
Drop it? Yeah, drop it because it's true. You're telling everybody they have to pay more money for everything, but you're doing these extravagant, lavish events all around the world. In an age where you can just go on the internet and just be connected to somebody. But no, you can't do this on Discord. You have to spend millions of dollars in order to do this.
True. Just invite all the countries to like the Munich Security Conference Discord server or the UN Discord server. Yes, king.
Look, there's lots of progress being made, but look, I'm not doing a stand-up interview, okay?
Why not? You're walking that way anyways. I think people around the world, you know, they say regaining trust. That's the whole purpose.
I do lots of media.
Friendly media.
No, I do. No, God, no.
The ones that are here
Somebody like
invited.
that.
Look, I'm doing.
How much money did it cost to get Trump to drive around the stupid fucking racetrack? Yeah, true. How much money did we spend, what was the other stupid thing? Oh yeah, with the security and everything for the fucking Super Bowl. Like, really? And I bet Asmon was watching that, the driver on the race was like, oh, this is so fucking epic. Finally, a president that fucking understands me. Oh, he fucking gets it, man.
I'm
Yeah, we
doing
had somebody
media
like
at
that.
this one.
Can we sit down and I'll make a time with you and answer some actual tough questions?
You can make a request for a meeting, and
So you can deny it.
look, as I say, with everyone else, you
Look, as I say, yeah, of course I'm going to deny
do
it.
the same thing as with the guy from True North.
Yeah,
I do think the guy's being a bit aggressive, so it's like kind of an example of like kind of two assholes. But overall, I mean, if you're a politician, you got to deal with that.
He's a good guy. I'm sure you're a good guy.
Yeah,
as
he
well.
doesn't deny,
All
doesn't
people
deny,
are good. It's absolutely right.
But the whole world is looking at this now going, you're a pack of hypocrites and you're at the top of the chain.
Is that
there.
what I mean, push it? Yeah, he is.
What would you answer people? Just give me
being
one
pushy.
answer to the people. Take care, sir.
Oh man,
Oh, man.
man.
You have just heard from my colleagues what we stand for as the Liberal Party. The Charter, healthcare, childcare, opportunity. We have made this the greatest country in the world. And now,
Well, that'll be true whenever the U.S. takes it over. That'll be true.
Whoa,
and
fucking
now our
epic.
neighbors want to take us.
Oh, fucking epic, bro.
No way. No way.
No way.
This party
Oh, jeez.
has more than quadrupled its membership in the past 2 months. More than 300,000 members,
Good job.
Yeah, because everybody wanted to
United
vote to figure out who's going to run the
with one
country, right?
purpose.
Probably that's what I would assume.
which is to make Canada even greater. For tous les Canadiens. You have just heard from my colleagues.
No one knows what that means. I think that's like gibberish or something. I think he's speaking in Canadian there. Let's see here. And he's talking about net zero. What is this?
Skepticism about ESG labels or sustainable labels, and it
Do Canadians vote for their prime minister? Or are they chosen by the party from the parliament?
again is one of the reasons we're having this ruthless, relentless focus on net zero. Because in the end, look, we can't
Oh, so that didn't even make sense. Okay.
Stabilize the climate unless we get to net zero. And it's as simple. These are hard numbers. Your emissions are either A or B. They're going up or down. And if they're going down, are they going down consistent with the science? We anchor it in the science, the same science the UN and others use for the 1.5 degree objectives. Skepticism about...
Man. I don't know what to think. Is the head of Brookfield's $10 million global transition fund aimed at investments to accelerate transition to net zero. He has a financial... He doesn't even say whether he has or not. I don't know about that.
There's increasing urgency. Climate change is an existential threat. We all recognize that. There's increasing urgency around that. But the converse of that, the flip side of that is if you're taking steps, making investments, coming up with new technologies, changing the way you do business, all in service of reducing and eliminating that threat, you're creating value. And what we have seen increasingly, spurred initially by the Sustainable Development Goals, accelerated with Paris, and then through social movements and others and governments acting, is society is putting tremendous value on achieving net zero. So the companies and those who invest in them and lend to them, who are part of the solution, will be rewarded. But those who are lagging behind and are still part of the problem will be punished.
Who? Is this your new prime minister? Is it normal that other politicians like understand things, right? That was an not interesting. I'm giving credit for what is the most bare level understanding, right? But he's talking about how there are market forces that dictate capital allocation in companies, right? Which is true. For instance, some people might want to invest more in a company that has DEI. The shareholders in Apple, for instance, voted to save DEI. Shareholders like that stuff, right? And he's talking about how in the population, in society, there is a desire for net zero. There's a desire for green energy, and that capital allocation is maybe going to match that, that customers are wanting to invest in these companies that are doing green energy investments, so that companies that aren't doing net zero goals or green energy investments are going to be punished accordingly because they're not going to have the same type of capital available to them, right? That's a good combination of like market forces plus like societal goals and like government hopes and policies or whatever, right? That's a good marrying of like all of these concepts and how they all work in tandem with each other. But I mean, like, this is like, you would expect like a basic retard to be able to understand this, but I don't think a single American or Canadian political commentator would put, okay.
Spurred initially by the Sustainable Development Goals, accelerated with Paris, and then through social movements and others and governments acting, is society is putting tremendous value on achieving net zero. So the companies and those who invest in them and lend to them, who are part of the solution, will be rewarded. But those who are lagging behind and are still part of the problem will be punished. Climate change is the next...
Man. Uh-oh. Canada is so cooked.
Sneaky. And now our Liberal friends, after they've caused all this damage, are going to pull a sneaky trick tonight. They're going to try to get elected for a fourth term. By replacing Justin Trudeau with his economic advisor, Mark Carney. Carney's advice drove up tax...
God, he sucks.
Carney's advice drove...
Carney sucks.
Up taxes...
8 hours ago. I would say this didn't age well, but I mean, he should know by now, but okay.
Housing costs and food prices, while he personally profited from moving billions of...
Wait, is Asmongold doing Canadian politics now? Oh, my friend, hello. This is a two-way street. You didn't know? You know, all you fuckers around the world have an opinion on U.S. politics. America also has an opinion on all your politics as well. Our opinion is just usually always fucking dog shit, but we still got one.
Dollars and thousands of jobs out of Canada to the United States. Working for Trudeau, Carney made Canada weaker and poorer. Working for himself, Carney made the United States richer and stronger. And for the first time in our history, Canada will have a sneaky prime minister with millions of dollars of financial interests that go directly against our national interest. And make no mistake, Donald Trump will have a big smile on his face as he exploits that go directly against our national interest. And make no mistake, Donald Trump will have a big smile on his face as he exploits all of Carney's many conflicts to attack Canadian workers and Canadian jobs. But we Conservatives won't let either of them do it. We will put Canada first.
I mean, I'm going to be real. Like, if I was a Canadian, I'd be voting for this guy.
We know.
I'm an American, so, you know, like, it's not really up to me. But, like, if I was a Canadian, like, because he's right. How can you trust somebody who has a bunch of vested financial interests overseas?
Oh, my God. I can't watch any more of this. I'm sorry. That's the end of that. I'm done with that video. Sorry. I can't make it any further. That's it. Sorry. All right. Next video. The state of politics on Twitch is truly dizzying. What? Lars Ulrich surviving 9/11. Okay, epic. Why JD Vance is Britain's most hated man. Do I care about this?
Guy to win again. We can't just keep saying he's a terrible human being, he's this, he's that, he's that. We've got to look at ourselves.
No, I don't. God, these people feel like they're going to be boring to listen to. Are they?
Well, anyway, thank you for joining us for tonight's discussion, The Future of Democracy in America, a conversation with The Atlantic. The editor of The Atlantic told me I have to really pump up the mentions of The Atlantic. It's The Atlantic Monthly. It's over 150 years old. It was a monthly. Now it's a minutely. Yeah, I don't know how you read every word of the copy, too. Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, you try. Yeah. Well, this is an incredible crowd. And
Wait, you missed why Dr. Avi voted for Trump. This is an hour and 37 minutes in.
What about you? Okay. What would you want?
Yeah, I probably would want the truth too. Yeah.
Who'd you vote for?
Oh, I voted for Trump.
Fuck you, dude. What's wrong with you? Don't you love this country?
And I voted for him knowing like all of these crazy things are going to happen, by the way.
And you stand by it. Yeah. I mean, how dare you? What the fuck?
I know. Terrible.
What's the rationale?
Well, the rationale is we can have that conversation. I don't know if we have 12:30 a.m. and I have work in the morning.
Yeah, okay. So I won't challenge you on it, but I just want to hear it.
Yeah, no. The rationale. Okay, so the biggest thing for me was the treatment of Israel, and by extension to that, our treatment of how we relate to terrorism.
Oh my God, the Nazis were right. These Jews are infiltrating our country. Oh no.
Broadly, my view on terrorism broadly is I think they need to get nothing but the full same treatment. I don't actually like the way Trump is engaging with terrorism as well, because I think he actually is negotiating with it. But I do think he's closer to my position on the treatment of terrorism, the existential threat of terrorism, than what Biden was. I think that Biden has royally cucked Israel, maybe not to the degree that Trump is cucking Ukraine, but I do think that
How did Biden royally cuck Israel when Israel was able to kill all 3 Hamas leaders, cripple Hezbollah, fend off an attack from, and counterattack Iran with essentially no repercussion? I feel like Israel's done pretty well. I feel like their military successes and everything were, like, they all went probably higher than anybody would have expected while Biden was president, no?
Ukraine has allies, at least in Europe, that Israel does not. And I think Biden has very much set a standard compared to, I'm not saying that Trump hasn't done many of these things as well, but Biden has set a humanitarian cuck standard that rewards terrorists in a way that just seems incredibly dangerous to me. And that at least Trump, while he is not shaping up to exactly what I want him to be, at least he has had some fresh air of the type of at least rhetoric that I'd like to see a single president have, any president have for terrorists.
This was 18 hours ago. I hope Pisco asked him, what about when he said that all the hostages need to be returned by noon on Saturday, and that time came and went, and Trump did fuck all about it?
Which is the full same treatment, which is, and we can go into why I think that is like a very crucial thing for the survival of civilization in the long run. And so just, and this is, go ahead.
You go first, sorry.
Yeah, and just to be clear, this is like, I had no doubts that I was voting for a madman. Like there were no, the one thing that I did hope for, and I do think is happening to some degree, is that we have enough institutions in our system that although crazy things would happen, we have enough things in our institution that there is some sort of reining in for the madman that happened last Trump administration and are to some degree happening this Trump administration. So, for example, you will see a lot of rhetoric about tariffs, but then when you actually get to the nitty-gritty of what the tariffs are actually covering, a lot of it is a virtue signal.
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I don't think.
Is that we have enough institutions in our system that although crazy things would happen, we have enough things in our institution that there is some sort of reining in for the madman that happened last Trump administration and are to some degree happening this Trump administration. So, for example, you will see a lot of rhetoric about tariffs, but then when you actually get to the nitty-gritty of what the tariffs are actually covering, a lot of it is a virtue signal. And then you'll see rhetorics about, these.
There are no guardrails for the Trump tariffs right now, but okay. Well, a majority from Congress could overturn the state of emergency that Trump has declared theoretically.
These H-1B, eventually it's like H-1B visa stuff. But then when he gets to the point where he realizes his administration saying, okay, well, actually we can't destroy the economy, all of a sudden you get the rhetoric about, oh, I was for H-1B visas all along. So there's this effect. And same thing with even RFK, like nut jobs like RFK. He was so anti-vax, and now he's trying to sell himself as like, okay, I wasn't really that anti-vax, guys. Come on, I support.
And you believe him?
No, I don't believe him. What I think is happening is I don't need to believe him. What I need to know is that what is happening is that he has. Obviously, I don't believe that he was always pro-vaccine. What I do believe is happening is that he's there's an effect of getting into the White House. There's a difference between being on your own and being a lunatic versus being a lunatic in the White House and then meeting sane people who are advising you and being like, hey, listen, you actually can't do this. Like, this will.
So Hegseth is our sane person. Tulsi Gabbard is our sane person. These are our sane advisors. Elon Musk is the sane advisor. Like, what?
Destroy everything, and here's why. And being like, and eventually just hitting them like, okay, I need to wait a minute, maybe I can't do this. I need to find a way of moderating my position, but still signaling to my supporters that or balancing those concerns. And I think we're seeing some of that effect. I think these people are really crazy, but they're getting a little bit of a hit of reality just by being in that position of power and being like, okay, and having all of their administration giving them some semblance of reality and being like, oh, wait a minute, I actually can't fuck up the entire economy and just get away with that, LOL. I actually can't destroy all of medicine, LOL. Maybe I should just signal to my supporters that I switched out the seed oils for the French fries with tallow, what RFK recently tweeted. Great job, good job, make America healthy again. Or maybe I'll switch out the sugar, or maybe I'll put sugar cane instead of high fructose corn syrup. Maybe I could signal to Maha for that instead of. And funnily enough, Ozempic is left alone, and Mounjaro is left alone, and vaccines are not illegal, and all of those things that RFK was selling himself on. Now he's going on. Yeah, now give him time. What I'm seeing now is that he's being put on these little useless tasks that are going to appease the Maha crew, but ultimately won't do much of anything. And as long as he's doing that, I think that's the effect. That's the hope. And so far that seems to be panning out. It's just like it panned out the previous administration. That is apocalyptic as some of these things have seemed. It turns out that there is this effect that when you actually get into an administration and you have experts who actually know what they're talking about advising you, you can't actually just destroy the world. Or at least you have a lot lower probability of doing that.
I think we should have a longer conversation about this. I guess I have one question. If it turned out that we stopped having free and fair elections, or if Trump clearly violated the Constitution and attempted and succeeded again in the third term, would you admit that you made a mistake?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well,
wait.
Would you admit that you made a mistake?
The world. Or at least you have a lot lower probability of doing that.
I think we should have a longer conversation about this. I guess I have one question. If it turned out that we stopped having free and fair elections, or if Trump clearly violated the Constitution and attempted and succeeded again in the third term, would you admit that you made a mistake?
This is way too far a red line. That is a ridiculous red line. In order for you to admit you've made a mistake on voting for Trump, it would have to be the abolition of our elections. There's got to be a line way the fuck before this. What the fuck? Bruh.
No one's talking about.
Okay, more trigger time. We might watch the Ethan thing today.
YouTube, I've pretty much.
Okay, let's listen to a bit of this, see if this is entertaining.
Suggests that there are a fair number of people who have some interest in tonight's subject, or maybe it's just a cult. I don't know. We have Ann Applebaum, George Packer, and Jeff Goldberg. Ann and George are star writers of The Atlantic. Jeff is the star editor and also sometimes the star writer. But I want to point out in the most self-serving possible way that all three are American Academy alums, and indeed all three had connections to the Academy that predate their connection with The Atlantic. So although The Atlantic is 150 years older than the Academy, this is really an Academy event, but with a lot of lip service being done to The Atlantic. And tonight we're going to discuss just what on earth is going on with the world's longtime democratic superpower. So few journalists out there today have been so far out in front on reporting on the developments threatening American democracy or the global rise of authoritarianism. And it is very hard to believe that our new post-Cold War period is all of 6 weeks old. It's only been 6 weeks. It feels like an eternity. But I am really, really grateful to have these three here today. And judging by the turnout, I'm not alone in thinking that. one of the oddities of introductions is that the less people need it, the more you have to do it. But so let me just say a few words about our guests. Ann Applebaum is a historian, a senior fellow at the Agora Institute at Johns Hopkins University, and a staff writer at The Atlantic. She was a fellow at the Academy in 2006 and 2008. And I just have to drop a footnote here. Both Ann and George comprise the entire group of people who have ever been fellows twice. We try not to let anyone know that, but they're, yeah. But I couldn't, you know, what was I going to do? Pretend they hadn't been here? So to the current fellows, don't try this. It's not going to work. We no longer have fellows come back, much as we would like to. Anyway, Anne has really dedicated a long and distinguished career to examining the rise of authoritarianism and the challenges that face democracies worldwide. She won the Pulitzer Prize in 2004 for her work, The Gulag of History. Just last year, as most of you know, she won the Friedenspreis des Deutschen Buchhandels, and she has a basket full of other honors, which were I to enumerate them, we wouldn't get to the conversation. Her most recent book is Autocracy, Inc., The Dictators Who Want to Run the World. She is the co-host of The Atlantic's podcast, Autocracy in America, and there she delves into the subtle and increasingly not so subtle erosion of democratic institutions in the U.S. George Packer is a staff writer at The Atlantic and is famous for his deep explorations of American life, as exemplified in such work as his masterful book, The Unwinding, which won the National Book Award for Nonfiction in 2013, and his 2021 book, Last Best Hope, America in Crisis and Renewal. And few writers today connect the dots from the lived experience of individual Americans to the national stage. George was a fellow in 2009 and 2014, I am compelled to say. And as many of you know, he is also the author of an extraordinary biography of Richard Holbrooke, founder of the American Academy in Berlin. Jeffrey Goldberg, last but not least, is the man of the week. And we call him, we've been saying that he's the man of the week because he is doing events all week here in Berlin. So it's Jeffrey Goldberg week here in Germany's capital. He is not only an alumnus of the Academy, he was a fellow here in 2015. He is also an Academy trustee and therefore one of the most important people in my life. We are especially grateful for his continued engagement, since he once described his class of fellows as being comprised of 7 or so experts on Peloponnesian pottery.
We know a tremendous amount about Peloponnesian pottery.
Yeah, and should the conversation flag, we'll head in that direction. Jeff is
in my year there was an expert on Troy, who I still remember everything he said to this day.
Yeah, well, Troy was important. Jeff is the 15th editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, and under his leadership, the magazine has produced some truly fearless journalism across an incredible expanse of topics. Does that include my articles? Okay.
Especially your articles.
Thank you. And during his tenure, The Atlantic won its first 3 Pulitzer Prizes, as well as the National Magazine Award for General Excellence, the highest honor bestowed by the industry for the past 3 years in a row. He has done all this while continuing to publish his own work as well, and if you haven't read his profile of former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Mark Milley, from late 2023, I urge you to do so after the event. Jeff is the author of several books, moderator of Washington Week with The Atlantic on the public broadcasting system, and I have to say, I imagine that is a huge challenge for you, not only because of the time it takes, but as a person with one of the very best senses of humor in Washington, you have to kind of keep a straight face through all the insanity.
They don't know. No? It's all jokes all the way down.
All right. I guess we know what to look forward to. He is the recipient of numerous awards, including the National Magazine Award for Reporting, the Daniel Pearl Award for Reporting, and the Overseas Press Club Award for Human Rights. Okay, so we're going to have a conversation for about 35 minutes. Those of you who are here and still on this side of the Wannsee, just put up your hand if you want to ask a question. If you're joining us via live stream, type your question in the Q&A part of the Vimeo platform. And I apologize if we don't get to everything.
They had a live stream
So
Q&A?
I think that it's fair to say we've all been astonished by the cannonade of executive orders emanating from the White House, the rampage through the bureaucracy by a chainsaw-toting Elon Musk, and the upending of decades of U.S. bipartisan foreign policy, and the apparent reorientation towards Putin's Russia. So I want to keep this upbeat. My staff told me I had to, and I guess let me start with the other side of it, which is the administration is still showing up for court appointments. Congress is still meeting, if not exactly deliberating. People are showing up and telling their congressmen what they think of them. Why don't we just go quickly through the 3 of you, or slowly through the 3 of you, and talk about what you think of the state of American democracy and what worries you most, and what gives you encouragement. George.
Thank you, Daniel. Upbeat? Well, when I look at the incredible production of microchips going on in the greater Phoenix area, I feel hopeful for my country. On the other hand, what worries me most is the American people. Because I think what we've seen in the last 6 weeks is that the checks on Trump's power that we grew up learning about in civics, Congress, the independence of the military, quasi-independent civil service, at least a non-patronage civil service, and probably the courts have all failed or seem like they're about to lie down. And what does that leave? It leaves public opinion. And Trump has always relied on public opinion because it is when he's doing illegitimate things, it's his claim to legitimacy. I speak for the people. And when he wins an election, wins the popular vote, he has a credible claim to speaking for a lot of the people. So I'm just watching what's happening out in the country. I haven't done reporting on this yet, but I hope to, because I think the key thing is whether the Trump administration begins to lose its supporters. It's not going to lose its MAGA base. They are permanent members of the Trump cult. It might lose some of the people who went Obama, Trump, Biden, Trump, and there are enough of them. But how do they express it? And when do they express it? And when they want to, will there be the free and fair election next time around that they assume they'll be able to express it through? I don't know that that's going to happen. I don't see exactly how we avoid, now that Trump has full control over all the levers of the federal government and some of the states, how we're going to have an election in which people can really freely and fairly vote and have their votes fairly counted. So I think it's up to the people. And right now, my confidence in them is kind of low. I feel like I've been cutting them a lot of slack for many years. I've been accused of cutting them too much slack. After 2016, when I heard Trump won because everyone who voted for him is a white supremacist and misogynist, if you're going to write them off like that, then maybe it is hopeless, and maybe it's also a losing strategy. 2020 seemed like, well, a lot of people voted in the middle of the pandemic. That's a good sign. There's still a belief in democracy, and the January 6th insurrection didn't succeed. When he came back from January 6th into the good graces of the Republican Party, that was when I became really deeply worried because I realize that that party is gone, can't be counted on to protect our democracy. And when the people added their voice to it last year, I stopped wanting to cut them slack. I think they've spoken, and they may well lose it. Not all the people. So what I'm experiencing watching what's going on in the United States is a form of what I would call moderated deja vu. As some of you know, I lived part of the time in Poland, and in Poland in 2015, we elected, and I'm a Polish citizen as well as a U.S. citizen, we elected an autocratic populist party that almost immediately also sought to capture the state. I mean, that to use the correct term, that is actually what's happening now in Washington, and it's not new to America, and it's been done many times before, and we know what it looks like. We have different political systems in the U.S. and Poland, and I won't go into all the details. In Poland, they started with the judiciary because they could, because it was possible to seek to change the highest courts. But they also sought to capture the civil service exactly in the way that Elon Musk is seeking to change the nature of the civil service in the United States. They went through these various institutions, and initially there was some reaction, and there were some big demonstrations, especially in regard to the courts. But it turned out in the first 2 or 3 years that people weren't deeply moved by theoretical change. So if you said you're losing the independence of the judiciary, that didn't mean enough to enough people.
Yes.
It was they don't know any judges. They are themselves not in courts. The idea that this was some kind of deep problem of the political system just didn't seem to be relevant to most people. And it took some time, and this is where I'll go back to the United States in a second. It took some time before that captured judiciary, that changed judiciary, began to make decisions that affected people. In Poland, there was a big one, which is that it narrowed, abortion is illegal in Poland, but they narrowed the law further so that women who had complicated pregnancies couldn't always have emergency abortions, and some of them died. And when that happened, for a lot of people, this drew a line, and this happened because of the captured constitutional court. People, for the first time, drew a line between this theoretical conversation about democracy and judges and stuff that happened to real people. And so what I'm waiting for in the United States, and I don't know how long it will take or exactly what form it will take, I'm waiting for the changes to the nature of the political system to begin to affect people in a way that they feel. Yeah. And then we'll know the answer to your question. I don't know how clear it is outside of Germany. But one other thing I think it should be clear is that much of what we've seen so far is a power grab. So when Musk uses the expression Department of Government Efficiency to describe what he's doing to state institutions, that's actually that's misleading. What he's doing is not designed to increase efficiency. If you want efficiency, you don't randomly fire people. You look for ways to save money. You understand the departments that you're trying to change. You understand what they do. What he's doing is creating a system that will scare and frighten people, make them leave the civil service, and then replace them with loyalists. They've already established in some of the U.S. government agencies these kind of purity tests. You have to say, if you want a promotion now in the Department of Justice, you have to say, what did you think happened on January the 6th? You have to say who won the 2020 election. But again, these are stories that we know from other countries. We know it from Poland. We know it from Hungary. We know it from Turkey. We know it from Venezuela. We know it from other places. And so at the moment, the people affected most are the federal civil servants who've been fired or who are, and those are, by the way, all over the country. They're in the Forestry Service in Idaho, and they're in the Department of Agriculture all over the country. The people most affected are them. As the change begins to happen elsewhere, as people feel the changes to the Environmental Protection Agency or the Health Service or maybe even Social Security, then we'll begin to understand what the reaction is. I mean, every reaction like that, every assault on the state has a counter reaction, and it will come. What was the question again?
Yeah.
Wait, can I just say just one word about each person up here? I have nice words about you.
Okay.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to thank the Academy for doing all this and putting this on. It's been a great pleasure to be affiliated with this institution for many years. Excellent leadership all the way through the years. Dan, you're doing a wonderful job. I'm not on the compensation committee of the trustees, so I can say that without impact or effect.
Oh yeah, Anne Applebaum. She was the one who fought with Trump over. Was she the one who said thank you, Trump, for? Oh fuck, was that her? Hold on. No. That was somebody else. Fuck. She's Sikorsky's wife. Elon is beefing with him over Sterling, right? Yeah. Was she related to the guy who was saying, thank you, Elon, for ensuring us that you're never going to cut off Starlink to Ukraine, and then they were fighting over who was funding it, basically? Fuck, these people are all tweeting too much.
But it's really great that you're doing this, and it's hard to lead an institution devoted to the buttressing of the American-German relationship when one party is interested in buttressing the American-German relationship and undermining it. So good luck with that. And let me say just a word about my two esteemed colleagues, if you don't mind. You're thinking of something to say. You're thinking of something witty to say. No. You mentioned Anne's collection of prizes. This is what it's like working with Anne. I call up Anne to have lunch one day, and she says, "I can't. I'm receiving some prize from the King of Spain." And then I said, "Oh right, I am too. I forgot. Wait, what time do we have to be there?" And what I want to say about George is that so far the King of Spain has not granted him a prize. No, you never know. We're working on that. But what I'll say about George is that one of the delightful things that happens at the Atlantic when I'm hiring a young person to be a junior editor or a copy editor or a young reporter, not infrequently, people ask me if one day they might get a chance to meet George Packer, which is quite touching. They also want to meet Anne Applebaum as well, but again, she's in Madrid probably. So with all that, the question was, why is everything so screwed up? Is that some version of that? Where's my source?
How bad is it?
So apart from the fact that the 80-year post-World War II liberal international order organized and maintained by the United States is now officially over, and that the United States is aligned with the Kremlin against Europe, that put that aside for a minute, and I'm sure Anne has comments on that, and George. The things I worry about the less visible manifestation. I worry about two things. One is a subject that Anne has written about wonderfully well, which is complicity.
I am trying, and I've been trying for 9 years now, not to be shocked by the behavior of people I know or knew. And I'm thinking of Lindsey Graham and Marco Rubio and all these sorts of people who change their stripes in order to fit in with the crowd. Anne has pointed out in The Atlantic that complicity is actually the norm in human behavior, not principled dissent. It's hard to do principled dissent, especially
Marion Bertler told me that.
And now the proper credit. But it's a fascinating idea that we assume that the natural impulse of somebody would be to stand for what they believe. It's not the natural impulse. And it's amazing how easily some people have bent to this. There's no Trump without those who bent toward Trump. I include J.D. Vance in that category, obviously, but there are dozens of people who know better. There's a category of people in the government right now who don't know better, fine. But those who know better, or those who change their views, worry me terribly. The other issue that worries me is the velocity of change overwhelms us cognitively. So you could argue, obviously, that the Zelensky, J.D. Vance, Trump fight was the most important event of the past week, possibly the past decades. But at the same time that happened, the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia, the federal prosecutor for Washington, who's a Trump loyalist, fired the 7 senior-most prosecutors, and has actually demoted the 7 senior-most prosecutors in his office, who are the people who prosecuted the January 6th rebellion, insurrection, and prosecuted Steve Bannon.
Yep. So what he's talking about here for this demotion of the people that work on the J6 stuff, this is part of the reason why people resign. You didn't hear about that demotion because they didn't come together and write like a joint letter of resignation or whatever else, right? They just get demoted, they'll get shuffled around, and then eventually they'll get fired, or they just don't have any more consequential work, and you just never hear about it. This is why people resign. I understand this more now.
And other figures in MAGA world, and they were not only were they bumped down to jobs that will force them to quit, they even had their parking spots seized. I mean, that's how deliberate and petty it gets. But what, and I use that as one example. There are many others. The seizure of the Kennedy Center means that there's a deliberate attempt to seize the commanding heights of culture. And I don't have any issues with the culture that they want to put in. The Trump people want to put in. It's fine. Maybe the Kennedy Center was too elite. Maybe it was too not focused.
Oh, has he heard the story that he must have, right? That at the Kennedy Center, they're planning on bringing the J6 choir to come and do a performance
on whatever music it is that people in Trump were like. That's fine, but this was a deliberate attempt to seize the commanding heights. I worry about a whole range of issues that people don't talk about because they're actually bigger issues. Obviously, looking at Rochelle over here, we're about to welcome measles back to the United States in service of magic, occult thinking. And so there's all of that. One thing I don't worry about to just close out is I don't worry about yet is the freedom of the press, so long as the ownership class maintains its integrity. Now, the entirety of the ownership class has not maintained its integrity. We happen to work for somebody who has not fallen down the slope that Jeff Bezos has.
Who owns the Atlantic? Because I was going to say the ownership class, the faith in that is rapidly dwindling because the people that you were hoping maybe would have been your stalwarts, your defenders of freedoms like Zuckerberg or maybe even Bezos have completely and utterly buckled to the Trump pressure, unfortunately.
Has fallen down, that the owner of the Los Angeles Times has gone down, CBS ownership, ABC ownership. But there's still a vibrant free press in the United States. They will, I predict, come after us in clever and maybe subtle and maybe not so subtle ways. But we exist. You can still say what you want. And so for that reason, among others, all is not lost.
Have you been surprised by the extent to which people have, so far it appears, many of the sort of publishing class that you mentioned have capitulated? I'm struck by the fact that, half of the discussion in Washington now is about tariffs, which seems to be Donald Trump's answer to almost everything. And, it just looks like suicidal in terms of the economy. And yet you don't ever hear that, Big Pharma has gotten on the phone and said, you can't do that.
Let me give you a very quick answer to that, which is that if I had $1 billion, I'd say whatever the hell I want. And I just don't understand the behavior of people who are so wealthy that they're liberated from consequence. I don't understand it.
Because they're not. I still disagree with this, that wealthy people just want more wealth. Like the wealth is a part of it, but I think the wealth is a function of the influence and the no, don't do that. I don't want that. Okay. Or influence is like a function of wealth. Like you get more wealth so that you can have more influence or more legacy or more of these types of harder to understand power or powers. And just because you're super wealthy doesn't mean that you're willing to, I guess, like give that influence up. Because there's a world where Trump attacks Facebook in such a way that Facebook slowly starts to fade away. It's not like Zuckerberg is going to be poor or, he's going to have to become homeless now. Like poor Zuckerberg can't afford anything, but he would lose the legacy of Facebook and the status and the position and all of that. I think this is what the ultra wealthy people are worried about.
Again, it goes to, Anne could probably better answer this because she understands the nature of complicity and the bending toward power.
I mean, there's another strange factor, which is that, there's still doubt in people's minds about what Trump means to do when he says something. So when we haven't had this experience with other presidents, I don't know, George W. Bush or Barack Obama said, I'm going to do policy X. Then there was a kind of debate. Is policy X good? Is policy X bad? There would be different think tanks would have views and people would write papers about it and maybe editorials, articles and investigations. When Trump says he wants to do something, we don't know what.
Why did all these tech CEOs never have to worry about that during Biden's term, though? Because despite what conservative media will tell you over and over and over again, the Democrats just weren't pressuring companies anywhere near as much as the MAGA likes to convince you of, right? This is why there wasn't a single person in the Republican Party who was worried about the fact that the president had just been granted criminal immunity. It's because they know they're the criminals, so they don't give a fuck about it. Nobody thought that Biden was seriously going to do anything illegal. Not really. And if Trump does anything illegal, it's going to be based.
Whether it's real. And that was what, and that creates a strange reaction. So he said at the very beginning of his presidency, he wants to take Greenland. And I was actually in Denmark the day that he had this horrible telephone call with the day after he had the telephone call with the Danish prime minister. And it was a very funny day. I did write about it. I was supposed to have one meeting and that was canceled. And I was supposed to have another meeting that was canceled because there was a kind of national crisis and meltdown because no one in Copenhagen knew what this meant. But what was really at the heart of it was not, a lot of people were having, here's the significance of Greenland and here are these minerals in Greenland. People realized that there was a kind of Kafkaesque emptiness at the, why does he want it? And almost anything he could possibly want to do in Greenland, he can do right now. He can have a treaty with the Danish government and build 6 military bases if he wants. And it was this realization that he wants it because he wants the map to look bigger, maybe because he wants to change the borders of the United States. He wants to exert power. And this was not something that you could write a position paper about or debate. And this is the tariffs are the same thing. I mean, are the tariffs actually an economic policy? The point is to raise money for the treasury, which he says sometimes, or are they a kind of expression of his willpower? I can make Canada scream. I can cause pain in the European Union and just to see what happens. And that makes it very hard for anyone, whether it's the CEO of a pharma company or whether it's a prime minister of a European country, to even know how to analyze this. Like, what are the
because what do you even call Trump and say, hey, this is going to hurt the economy? Okay, and it's about fentanyl, right? Or if you're a part of some health research institute or some policing body or whatever in the United States, like Trump, like, it's okay, bro. Like, there's not a lot of fentanyl coming in from Canada. It's like, okay, it's about their markets. Oh, okay. Like, the reason can be anything at any point in time, and he's never really fully transparent about it because you can't just say it's for my ego or for my legacy, obviously. So
what are the correct arguments that you should make to Trump? Should you come to Washington and say this would be a very bad idea, Mr. President? Should you flatter him? Should you write a paper? Should you get a bunch of economists to say this is a very bad idea, it's bad for business? I think that's actually already happened. And the fact that these are policies that aren't based on any
it's not like there are all these economists giving Trump advice saying, like, this is a really good policy, Mr. President, keep it up. This is exactly what the U.S. economy needs right now. Like, it's not like he's got a ton of support from any of these people, right? It just doesn't matter.
Any judgment about what's good for America or any judgment about what's good for the economy. These are power plays, games. I mean, I think I'll finish by saying, for me, the most extraordinary thing about the Oval Office conversation on Friday was actually that it became clear in the course of the conversation that what really bothered the president and the vice president of the United States was the fact that the Ukrainian president kept bringing them back to reality. Trump, we're going to do a deal with Putin. Okay, and Zelensky says, actually, we did a bunch of deals with Putin. He always broke the treaties. And then so what would we do then? It's not going to happen. And what really angered them was when Zelensky sort of burst their alternative reality and said, no, that's not true. And this is the thing that I think is going to be very hard for everybody, for Americans, but also for Europeans, is that they're in a different reality. They're not interested in the good of the Americans. They're interested in themselves, their power, their image, what's said about them in the podcast world. That's it, and that applies to tariffs, but it also applies to a lot of other things.
So let me try out an understanding of the drama of the tariffs on you all. It seems to me that Trump has a need to kind of stage manage every interaction with a particular issue. Ukraine, a little different, but the Canadians don't even know why he wants to inflict tariffs on them, which is a remarkable thing when you think about it. But he will say, I'm going to impose 25% tariffs, and what he's done is essentially created an opposition, and he holds the ability to resolve that by saying, at the site of any kind of concession or effort to do anything, it's like, I won. And so it's this constant stream of, I showed them who was boss and I won. And that seems to me a lot of what's going on with the tariffs. I kind of wonder how long you can play that trick. He did this, of course, in the first term, in the way he stage managed meetings with the North Korean leader and even the Chinese. And, it was like, Chinese ultimately capitulated. They're going to buy $100 billion of our goods. They never did. But he claimed that he did it and he won. And it seems like there's a profound need for, winning so much you'll get tired of winning, as he once said.
Well, I think what he's showing is that we're a pretty powerful country, actually. And if our position in the world is just to squeeze and squeeze until we get what we want, whether it's some trade deal that is beneficial to us or a piece of land, we actually have a fair amount of muscle to do that. And people they're going to be asked about capitulation. Countries are going to capitulate because they're scared. And it shows you that for all its wrongs, the American Pax Americana, the liberal international order, whatever you want to call it, did show a certain restraint over 80 years, because we're now seeing what it looks like unrestrained. And it looks like something closer to 19th century might makes right, great power behavior. But I want to go back to capitulation at home, because I think we have to look at, in some ways, at ourselves and ask, why are elites, and we're sort of at the lower ranks of maybe of the elite class.
Lower upper middle class.
We're lower upper middle class. In Orwell's famous phrase, why have so many capitulated? And I have to think it's because a lot of them never really cared all that much about.
True, but also wait. Uh-oh.
And if you have different people in the administration giving different messages, the Commerce Secretary and the President are having different messages on the same day. That's not giving the market any sort of ease or certainty for investors. So I wouldn't be surprised if we have an even greater crash.
We should let Jonathan keep talking, because the market's come back 50 points.
There you go. There you go.
But obviously, the Dow is 1,500 points below where it was when Donald Trump took office.
Yeah.
That's not a good look.
Well, and if you
Fox News has turned on Trump and is attacking him. I don't think this was a turn and an attack. We'll wait for more, okay? That was like a 30-second of the most tepid criticism, barely. And it wasn't even blaming Trump. It was like, there's just contradictory messaging. Fuck off.
Liberal democracy, it just didn't mean anything in their guts. It was a nice system, it was stable, it was profitable, but it wasn't a profound value. So if it suddenly looks like it might not be so wise to endorse Trump's opponent, even if you're the second, third, whatever richest man on earth, you might not feel you're losing very much by killing that endorsement. And I think one thing we really need to think about is how we also let this happen. Something that's not fun to think about, it's not nice, and it may feel a bit lopsided because it's Trump and his party who are doing this. But I do think the idea that globalization would make us free and prosperous and would make the world more free and prosperous, which was the guiding ideology of the post-Cold War, it failed abroad in a lot of places, although a lot of countries did become richer. It also created inequality abroad, and it created massive inequality in the West. In some ways, the losers of globalization was the Western working class. And how attuned to that were the...
What? Losers how? I hope they get into this. I don't know if any of these here are economists. Losers how? What do they mean by that?
Leaders of our institutions. How much did they want to know about it? How well did they understand it? Why was Trump such a mystery to the American press? Even today, there's something mysterious about him and his people. They're talked about a little bit like a foreign body, and sometimes he acts like a foreign body, the Manchurian candidate. But it's something that I think we can't escape, is to ask, yes, liberal democracy is on the ropes, it needs to fight back, but also what does it need to understand about itself that got us into this position? Because it didn't simply happen because 49.5% or whatever the American people voted for Trump. Do you have a response?
You can run for office. Yeah, that's good.
How many people are in the audience? What?
I think what George is leading to is this would not have happened had the Democratic Party had an adequate response to Trumpism, and obviously they had plenty of time. I mean, you can center the blame on Joe Biden for reneging on his promise to be a transitional figure. You could center your critique on identity politics. There was a fascinating meeting of the DNC over the past week where they came up with a new centrist platform, and the first item in the platform was, we should be a patriotic pro-American party. It's like, if you have to tell yourself that's a prerequisite for entering the discussion, well, then you're the way. But the interesting thing is that the reckoning hasn't really happened. I mean, you might have your own views of that, but I don't think the reckoning has happened, and the party is captured by different interests that can't seem to compromise. This is not to blame the Democrats for the rise of Trump. I blame the people, those who know better, for the rise of Trump. I blame social media and the softening of the shelling of the beach that 20 years of reality TV represents, and all the rest. But for those of you who are looking for some kind of relief in the form of a Democratic Party, not only ready to fight, but to fight in the language of, let's just call them normie Americans, the 60 or 70% of Americans who fit into the broad middle, they're not there yet. And you add into that a subject that George and I talk about frequently, the fact that there will be continued attempts, state by state, in the next election, the midterms in 2026. There will be continued attempts, you have to assume, to steal elections that aren't going in that direction, voter suppression and all kinds of other shenanigans, and you have to be ready for that as well. So just because the Democrats might become more popular, let's say egg prices continue to rise, inflation goes up, don't assume that. This is true.
Like, remember, the most sophisticated and schemy plot ever to steal an election in the history of the United States happened on for the 2020 election. That was Trump. It's all out in the open. It's nobody contests this or denies this. That's just a fact. That's just a fact, right?
That everything is as straightforward as it seems. There will still be efforts to suppress voters who don't accord to MAGA principles, but this whole thing has to start, and I'm not making a partisan argument here, I'm just making an observation. The whole thing has to start with the Democratic Party that knows how to talk to Americans.
Well, that's a really interesting point, only because, what we've seen is the sorting out of America according to education. Political parties, Democrats now clearly the party of the educated, Republicans the less educated, which Trump used to say, I love those uneducated people. And yet, even though Democrats have often espoused policies that would benefit the less educated, they didn't have a way to talk to them about it, and they have lost vote share in a pretty dramatic way.
Yeah, there's another issue here, which is the question of what matters more. Does reality still matter? So the fact that, I don't know.
Yeah, so it's not about being pro-America. It's about sounding pro-America. That's the thing that matters the most. It's about how you come off, which is why that one guy said talking to voters, talking to normie people. Yeah.
That Joe Biden, helped get.
Do these guys just accuse others of being normies? Yes, because these people are, it's well known in political circles, if you understand political research or anything at all, it's not even, again, it's not a debated thing, that people that work in politics are very abnormal compared to the average American. That, when you poll staffers and you poll people working in government on their political positions or what they feel about whatever, they're way, way, way off the norm of what the average person cares about or thinks about. These are things that people that work in politics have to check mentally all the time, because you and your whole political body can be in a totally different world compared to what normie, average, just American voting citizens think or care about.
New factories built and brought some manufacturing back to America. The fact that they did a child care benefit. Do policies matter? Are they affecting people, or do they not really matter anymore? And are people more affected by the world that they live in online? And again, I come back to the Friday meeting of the Oval Office. I mean, that was also a conflict between real realities that people experience on the ground and this kind of imaginary world where where other things are happening. And honestly, I don't know the answer. I don't know which matters more. Clearly, part of what the Democrats have to do, it's not just about their message. It's also about how do they, in this new world where online reality matters more than real reality, they can't just be having a policy conversation. It can't be about fixing inflation even or fixing the roads or building infrastructure, because they did that. It has to be about what are the means by which they're reaching people. We now know that. I'm not going to remember off the top of my head the exact statistics, but something like I'm making this up, but approximately 2/3 of Americans who get their news from journalism, meaning newspapers, television news, right wing or left wing. Those 60%, some 2/3 of those people voted for Democrats, and of the people who don't ever read any journalism and get their news from YouTube and social media and podcasts, the 60, 2/3 of them voted for Republicans. So there's also a question of it's not just what they say, it's how they say it, and what is the what is going to be the alternative to the to the alternative world that has been now successfully created online by some television, some social media, some podcasts, some YouTubers have created a world in which you hear one set of messages every day. How do Democrats reach into that? And is there some way of building an alternative?
So, and I want to stick with you just for 1 second because we'll open up to the audience in a minute. But you're the Russia expert here. How do you explain the Trump Putin thing, taking into account the Mueller report, which showed that people? Is it just Trump just likes the tougher guy on the block and ultimately wants to have an arrangement with whoever the powers are and carve up the rest, carve up the weak? How do you explain this? And let's assume for a moment that the most nefarious interpretations are.
So I honestly don't need the nefarious interpretations. Like, I don't need some secret meeting, and I've never needed them. I wrote a lot about this in 2016. You can just use what you see in public, what we know for fact, things that aren't disputed. And that the undisputable truth is that Trump has been fascinated by Russia since the 1980s. He made his first trip in 1987. Afterwards, he came back and he took out these full-page ads in newspapers calling on the U.S. to stop wasting so much money on allies, meaning Europe and at that time Japan. So this has been a theme in his life for decades. He has also a long history of known interactions with Russian business, also over decades. I mean, the business that he was in, which is real estate, he has to stop wasting so much money on allies, meaning Europe and at that time Japan. So this has been a theme in his life for decades. He has also a long history of known interactions with Russian business, also over decades. I mean, the business that he was in, which is real estate, had particularly in the 2000s had a huge influx of mostly anonymous money, or at least a lot of it was anonymous money coming from Russia. And one of his sons famously said that. And so you don't need any more. He has a positive view of Russia. He has a positive view of Russian money. It's possible that in one of those low moments, Russian money bailed him out. There are a few examples of that. He admires people who operate as he would like to do, without checks and balances, without the rule of law, without boring courts and journalists and rules about transparency. He sees that Putin is able to operate that way, and he's attracted to that world. And so this is an attraction he's had for a long time.
Yeah. He's jealous.
Yeah.
I mean, he's jealous. I mean, a loser looks like Justin Trudeau. That's what a loser looks like, right? A winner looks like someone who kills his enemies, beheads people in Saudi Arabia, commands an economy in China. He's just, sometimes the obvious thing is the obvious thing. He's more authoritarian in nature than he's democratic in nature, and we just haven't experienced that yet in American politics. We've had good presidents, we have bad presidents, we just haven't had this. The Germany issue is a special issue. It cannot. Well, I think I actually.
Why does he have it in for the Germans?
Yeah. I mean, I think I do know the answer. Should I tell the answer?
Yeah, give it away. Yeah.
I can hold on to a commercial break to leave everybody anticipating. So there's a scene, a non-famous scene in the Oval Office in the first term. Remember, he had, as we all know, a pretty terrible relationship with Merkel. And this is a confirmed story. I mean, multiple people heard this, and it is a guaranteed 100% true thing. The subject of Merkel came up in a meeting with some national security staff, and he said, and I apologize for the language, I'm just quoting him, and he said, I hate that crowd bitch. And the conversation went on about Merkel's various...
Crowd bitch? Is that what he said?
I'm just quoting him. And he said, I hate that crowd bitch. And the conversation went on about Merkel's various deficits. And then he explained why he hates the crowd bitch so much. He said, let me tell you, I understand the Germans. I was raised by the biggest crowd of all. And then he points to a picture of his father. He says, Fred Trump, the biggest crowd of all. There's something...
Oh, no. It's the daddy issues again.
I mean, nobody's gotten him on the couch. People who try from a distance fail because you can't. But there's something tied up psychologically with his father, the way he was raised, the difficult emotional circumstances of his early childhood. And then there's the overlay of the usual reasons he doesn't like democratic leaders who operate within restraints, because to him to operate within restraints suggests that you are a loser, and that's why he obviously wants to lift all restraints on the behavior of American soldiers in war, for instance, because he cannot underestimate how much he looks at what Russia is doing in Ukraine and doesn't care. These things don't, he once said, and I'll end here, but this always struck me, and you mentioned the Mark Milley, he once said to Mark Milley, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Milley was arguing for the demotion or the expulsion of a member of the SEAL Team 6, for violating a corpse in Afghanistan. And he said, what's the difference? You're all a bunch of killers anyway, meaning you in the military. So he doesn't, so he values brutality. And so if he values brutality, he's going to admire people who are brutal.
I would also say for him, this relationship with Russia that goes back 50 years, this admiration for Putin, these are things that are important to him. And Ukraine is a kind of stumbling block. It's in the way. I mean, you could hear that in this contempt as well. Ukraine is an insignificant factor that is blocking this relationship that he wants to build. I mean, there are various stories of what he wants and what Putin wants. They want some kind of big meeting. They want a new Yalta. Maybe they want to do it with Xi Jinping. There's a lot of stuff, imaginary, maybe stuff going around about what they think. But he has in his mind a kind of grand television scene, a big triumph. And Zelensky is in the way. And actually, to some degree, Europe is in the way. Europeans have these objections, and they need to be swept aside. I think Jeff is right. That's the way to look at it.
That biggest crowd of all story, though. I mean, does that mean Fred Trump was a horrible authoritarian, as he was, according to biographers? If so, you may hate him, but he became him. So he took the wrong lesson from being raised by an authoritarian.
Yes, Dr. Papa, all right.
I'll collect my fee from the president at the end of our.
I think you're right. I mean, we all do this game, and you're probie right, but we can't.
Who cares? It doesn't matter.
The action
it's all in the open with Trump. There are no secrets. There is nothing hidden.
He tells you what crimes he's going to do, and then he does them. It's like not that hard to read.
He voices his admiration for Putin repeatedly. Like, we don't need to know. There's no secret. I mean, the one oddity I would add, and this is maybe also important for this audience. I mean, there is how and why he has come to repeat Russian propaganda, which is also something he's been doing for a long time. I don't know the answer. I mean,
Wait, did she say I do know the answer, or I don't know the answer?
How and why he has come to repeat Russian propaganda, which is also something he's been doing for a long time, I don't know the answer. I mean.
Okay, the answer that I got from chat, my genius chat, or from an email, I don't remember, that I kind of like is the idea that Donald Trump wants to play like big power politics or whatever. He likes the idea of dividing the world up into, you know, if Russia's strong and they can take over Europe, Russia can take over Europe. And if China's strong and they can take over Taiwan, China can take over Taiwan. Because if those are the rules of the world, I want to be a big American and I want to take over Mexico and Canada. And that's just how I see the world. So if they want to do it over there, I'm going to do it over here. Now, I don't know if that's giving him too much credit for being able to think that far to the future, but I'm actually fairly convinced by that.
I mean, I noticed it first in 2016 during the election when he would literally pick up kind of Sputnik conspiracy theories. You know, Obama created ISIS, Google searches favor Hillary Clinton. These were often Russian propaganda stories, and then he would grab them and use them in the campaign. And like I saw him doing it. And whether he's just getting it from the internet, whether he is getting it directly from Putin, from who he's been talking to, whether there's some proxy between them and their various theories about who that might be, who's transmitting them, I don't know. But he is now repeating, again, he did it on Friday, but he's done it at other times. He's repeating the Russian worldview, and someone is getting it to him, or he sees it, or it's on his internet feed. I don't know. And that's very disturbing because that's of course also building this alternative reality in which he and Putin will do a great deal. And you know, Ukraine's leader is an illegitimate dictator who can be swept away.
I'm going to open up in 1 second, but George, I want to come back to you about losing faith in the people, and Anne was also talking about the question of action and reaction. Jeff Cowie can correct me if I'm wrong, but Thomas Jefferson said something along the lines of the tree of liberty every once in a while needs to be watered with the blood of patriots.
She already said that. She mentioned Trump wanting a Yelp.
Jeff Cowie can correct me if I'm wrong, but Thomas Jefferson said something along the lines of the tree of liberty every once in a while needs to be watered with the blood of patriots. And I'm wondering,
Pirates, I think. Didn't he say the blood of pirates? He said the blood patriots. We have a Marshall McLuhan moment.
Yeah.
Jeff Cowie, aren't you in the audience?
Why wouldn't he support Ukraine then to stop his great rival Russia? Because I think that Trump believes in power through ownership, not power through friendship. So the United States having an economy that is 70% of the size that it is now, but in the absence of partnerships with Mexico and Canada that account for 50% of the U.S. economy. I'm just making numbers up, but like he would prefer that. He would prefer the U.S. stand on its own. So he doesn't see Europe as beneficial to the United States insofar as he can exploit them, basically. There are no friendships in his mind, just territory to be conquered and people to be exploited, like obstacles, basically.
He's probably in the other room watching. Yeah. You're a contemporary historian, so no Jefferson. All right, let's stipulate it was patriots, okay? So are we all Hegelians now? Are we waiting for the reaction? Is it going to be people going broke because of tariffs, women dying because they can't get reproductive health care, civil servants because they lose their jobs, and this is going to cause the reaction? Or are you just even more down than that?
No, waiting, that word makes me very unhappy. The whole point at a moment like this is not to allow yourself to slip into a state of passivity. And that is a strong temptation. You're dazzled, you're shocked, you're disoriented. As soon as you've written your piece about USAID, that ship sailed 2 weeks ago, and now you've missed 5 other unbelievable attacks on the world's people, really. If you look at the programs from USAID that are being destroyed. So
I can't even imagine as a journalist, because you've got to do research for a story, you've got to maybe reach out to comment, you got to figure things out, and by the time your story even gets, written, let alone published, like who knows what all's happened in the meantime and what you've missed.
Waiting is not the thing to do, and it's not just out of some we must all rise to the occasion. It's because passivity feeds on itself, and you become paralyzed if you don't think there's anything to do. My advice is do something. I don't know what it is, honestly, and different people will have different answers. Fortunately, the three of us are making a living doing something, and I don't know what I would do right now if I didn't have journalism as.
And you that well.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The point is, we are doing something. I don't know how much good it is. I don't know who's listening to us. We have a lot of subscribers, but they're not really making decisions right now. But for the public who object, do something. Whether it's organizing a civic group, or whether it's preparing to run for local office, or whether it's writing online, whatever. Do something so that you yourself. It's almost like don't allow yourself to be flattened by this, because once that happens, you can't get up again.
Yeah, no, I had this. In fact, I had this conversation this afternoon. I had this conversation almost daily with somebody, a relative or somebody online or somebody in a podcast who wants to know, what can people do so that they don't feel. And there are lists people have written. I mean, there are, I've written them. You should be involved in. You should run for office. You should help somebody else run for office. You should, organize a group around an issue that's important to your community. You should, and often you're right that by doing something, you also overcome this feeling of powerlessness and helplessness that so many people feel.
I could check to UNICEF. I mean, right now they're the international NGOs that were the life support system of. They were the life support system of hundreds of millions of people around the world. They've been killed because it turns out America's powerful. They needed our money. Well,
America was supplying 40% of all international humanitarian aid, in all forms, and it was also the country that was supplying a lot of the direction and guidance. So a lot of it was delivered through, thanks to U.S. logistics. So it's not just the money; it's also the way, the means of delivery, and there isn't an immediate or obvious way to replace it.
And I'd add one more thing. I did say I've become a bit disillusioned with my fellow Americans. I have. Don't so give up on them that you refuse to talk to anyone you disagree with, even if it's going to lead to nothing, which it usually does. You still have to make the effort to talk to them. If you know any of them, right now we're so siloed in our country that the chances are that a Trump partisan may not know any liberal Democrats and vice versa, but you still have to talk to each other.
I mean, the final point on that is that, I felt this after the election. It's like my problem is that I love Americans. I love all different. I relate to born American. People who vote for Trump are good people who do good things in the world. Some are racist, some are misogynist, some are X, some are Y, some have been misled. If you want to go that route, obviously, but it's polarization. There's also an instrumental reason, like your fellow Americans. Polarization that Trump needs to stay in power requires us to hate each other.
Questions? Please wait for the mic, Christian.
Thanks for your insights tonight. This is wonderful, Christian Henderson. You've alluded to this divide several times. There is evidence that there are certain people who live in a completely different news reality, that they don't even understand some of the things that we're talking about tonight. And we talked about this silos. Is it irreversible? Is there a way out of this to where we can come to a common understanding of what's actually going on? Because that seems like that's part of what is necessary to have these conversations that you're saying, or is it irreversible?
Kind of one short point on that. I would have said, absent the pandemic, I would have said that the reintroduction of measles would be one of those things that, you can't hide from measles. I mean, it's a physical reality, except that numerous, and former head of the CDC will tell me that I'm wrong about these numbers, but you can look at the response of the Trump administration to the initial days of the pandemic, and Operation Warp Speed was great. He doesn't own it now because that was involved. That was the production of a vaccine, and you can't take credit for a vaccine, but that was pretty great. But other policies may have led to excess deaths exceeding 300,000, and so I think it's fair to say that more people died than should have died because of policies and an attitude evinced by the first Trump administration. And so, I would say, if I quote a friend from the audience, 10% inflation will do it. Egg prices will do it. The really quotidian stuff would do it. But people in the bubble are really in the bubble. And, I'm sure that if egg prices continue to go up, somehow it's going to be Kamala Harris's fault.
I mean, it's funny. 3 or 4 years ago, I wrote a large article in the Atlantic magazine.
Good for you.
Yeah, and I wrote it with my
big time.
That's right. Yeah. with my friend Peter Pomerantsev, and the topic was exactly this. The topic was about, could you reform social media? Like, is there a different form of online conversation that would be more productive, more fact-based, more evidence-based, but even just more consensual? Like, are there ways of organizing an online conversation so that it's not polarizing? Because the actual rules, the sort of underlying structure of social media, is designed to produce performances, and it gives rewards for outrage. So the more outrageous you are in whatever political direction or even cultural or sexual direction, the more likes and hits and attention you get. So would there be a way to think about organizing an online conversation differently? And the answer is yes. There are ways to think about it, and there are academics who've thought about it and designed it. There are some countries that have tried some experiments with it. Taiwan has tried it in a few different ways. The Taiwanese are particularly focused on questions of disinformation because they face it every day as a kind of very existential challenge from China. But there hasn't. I should say there have been congressional members of Congress, senators who've talked about legislation that would change the way it regulated. Of course, there's the possibility of European Union regulation that could also change the way it works. Not moderate it, not design the content, but change the underlying structure and rules, change the way the algorithms work. And it's technically possible. It could be done. What there hasn't been yet is anybody brave enough to do it. I mean, the only India banned TikTok. The U.S. almost banned TikTok and then got scared and stepped back, some version of that. But these aren't there are more sophisticated intelligence ways to do it. It's just that there hasn't been no one's had the guts to do it. I still have some hope that the European Union might do it. I mean, if we finally come to the moment where we understand that online polarization and the existence of these alternate realities is doing real damage to our democracy and making it impossible for us to live together, maybe then, and also in the case of Europe, that it's coming from companies that aren't.
That's good. They got there. Took a while, but we're getting there. We cannot live in these fractured realities anymore. The inability for us to see the same world has never been as bad as it is right now, and it is unworkable. It is unworkable. Not like it's damaging us or it's hurting us or it's making it's unworkable. You just can't. You can't function in two separate realities like this.
Even European, and are bringing in outside influence for their own reasons. I mean, Elon Musk has his own reasons why he wants the EU to break up. And they're bringing in, maybe then there will be a moment when we have the nerve to do it, but no one's done it yet.
And that will spark the true end of the transatlantic relationship. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen. I'm just saying that you can hear the platforms championing at the bit to have that fight.
Yeah, I mean, actually.
Wait, one sec. Just kidding. Just me, man.
Well, you've heard it. I mean, this is every time I come to Germany, somebody quotes this at me. I mean, J.D. Vance has said, if you dare regulate social media, then that's the end of NATO. But see, the thing is, if they end NATO first, then that threat is meaningless.
Yeah, there it goes. That's right. Wow. Boy, would that be bad sequencing. Okay. Yes, right over here.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Lars. The Economist is ranking the U.S. Regularly as a flawed democracy. We look at the gerrymandering.
How do you think we can merge realities? We can't. One has to be destroyed, unfortunately.
We look at most senators are millionaires. If we look at the suppression of votes. My question, are there any pressure groups or politicians in the U.S. who are trying to strategically mend and optimize maybe the American democracy and how it is working?
Many.
I suspect that Trump doesn't want security guarantees for Ukraine because he viewed the 2022 invasion as a good thing. He was able to use it as a campaign issue to attack Biden, a temporary ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, followed by another invasion in 2029. Be prepared for Trump. No, that's not why. He just doesn't give a fuck. That's it. He doesn't care about... The fuck are these noises? He doesn't care about that at all. It's. I don't think it's any more complicated than that. He just doesn't give a fuck about what happens over there.
Many, but do you want to answer that? I mean, I'm in some of those groups, but you probably are too.
I mean, ever since Citizens United, there's been a sense that that is the key to turn to start to get fresh air into American democracy because it would lead to more competition. It would lead to less corporate control over politics. It would lead to... Oh, Citizens United was a Supreme Court decision from about 15 years ago that essentially ruled that money is speech and that there is no limit to how much you can spend on a campaign, whether it's direct giving to the campaign, or dark money, which is given to the parties. And there are limits to what you can give to a campaign, but if you want to give $30 billion, then you have to turn the lights out and give it to a political action committee that gives it to the parties or to a campaign. It's a shell game. It's a fraud. And so the Supreme Court opened the gates to unlimited money in politics, which means that elections now cost, like, I don't know, what did the last, anyone know? Maybe $100 billion? Who knows? The problem is
$100 billion? What if you do all the super PAC money even? Was it that high? Is that true? Does anybody have a link to that? Link me up.
Every fine idea of reform.
That sounds like an order of magnitude high, but I could be wrong.
Whether it's gerrymandering, whether it's money in politics, whether it's the idea of ranked choice voting, which can have some success at the local level, we so hate each other politically that if one side suggests it, the other side will kill it. It's just automatic. It's like a reflex. There is no deliberation. There is no let's get the problem-solving caucus together in the House to try to work out a compromise at both parties. It will be killed by one party or the other, and most likely by the Republican Party, because their instinct for the jugular, frankly, is just a lot stronger than the Democratic Party's, and their hatred seems to be stronger. So that hatred is the core problem. There's plenty of good ideas and there's plenty of good organizations, but as long as my political idea is your loss, and therefore you have to kill my idea, none of it will work, because we are a 50-50 country. Now, there's been a kind of movement, especially on the left, to say we are not a majority rule country. We have a Senate that is grossly unrepresentative. Like if Wyoming and California have the same number of senators, we have a Supreme Court that is not elected and that seems to be making legislative decisions. We have gerrymandering that stacks state legislatures. So we have all kinds of ways in which we do not allow the majority to rule. And if only we got rid of those things and maybe even had a constitutional convention, a second one, then democracy would flourish. I've always been a little skeptical of that, and now I'm really skeptical, because look at the results of our elections. It just doesn't work out that way. We are 50-50. We've been 50-50 for longer than we were in the Gilded Age, which is the closest parallel to this. And so I fear a second constitutional convention. Who knows what Elon Musk might get done in a second constitutional convention? I would rather work with our terribly flawed, creaky old one and maybe find a way to get past this period of mutual hatred, because that is the fundamental problem in our politics.
Just to say, there is at the state level, there is a movement to rewrite state constitutions, which may have as its aim.
Have you used your gaming laptop on an airplane at all? I've been struggling since the base charger trips the outlet as soon as it's plugged in, but I found out I can charge my laptop with the USB-C laptop charger, so that might be a hope next time I fly. You have to bring your own battery and then a USB-C charger. The wattage is going to be way too high to ever use it inside of an airplane. I think those things trip at like, is it like 30 watts or something? Or 30 or 40 maybe? And I think those laptop, the big blocks will be like 150 or 180. They're huge, huge, huge big boys.
The rewriting eventually of the American Constitution, but it's not coming from a liberal point of view, just to say. I mean, there are a lot of organizations that do fight gerrymandering, do voter participation, that, as George said, to look at changes to electoral laws at the state level and so on. But he's right. They haven't been able to have a national impact yet.
Okay. I see people all the way in the back, preferably a female person, because we haven't had a female person yet.
What about me? What
in
am
the
I?
Back?
Chopped liver? No.
I haven't called on you.
Hi, as the female person asking a question.
That's right. I couldn't hear that. What was that?
Female person.
Thank you so much for your time. This has been incredibly useful. We've been discussing Ukraine and Russia quite a bit. I was wondering if y'all would be willing to weigh in on what feels like a million years ago, but was quite recently, the meeting with Netanyahu and the subsequent AI video of Trump creating some type of utopia in Gaza.
It says you've written all over it.
I was wondering if you think, again, we need to more parse President Trump's words. Do you think this will actually match some type of action in the region? Thank you so much.
I've already made a reservation at the Ritz-Carlton Gaza, so I got an email and I said send credit cards. I just did. I don't know if that was I don't know. I don't want to address the Middle East conflict right now, in some or in part, but I would say there's an interesting dynamic going on in Washington right now. And I saw that AI video. By the way, that AI video means nothing except it means everything, in the sense that, again, it's a velocity question. The more we
and crazy
see AI manipulation of reality or manufacturing of totally new reality, it's like a cognitive tsunami, right? You can't possibly correct everything that's going on, especially on platforms that want that kind of cognitive chaos. But the interesting thing in Washington right now is that many supporters of Israel, or a good number of supporters of Israel, support Trump. A good number of supporters of Netanyahu's vision of Israel, at least, support Trump, and they argue that Trump is a loyal friend of Israel and that Israel will benefit in various ways from a relationship with Trump. And I think that this belief is in defiance of everything we know about Trump, who is purely transactional. And I mean, there are societal reasons. There are people around Trump who obviously encourage a close relationship with Netanyahu. But the idea that he's going to be loyal to Israel as a matter of his own moral vision or ethics or his own sincerely held beliefs, I think is absurd, only because he doesn't believe in anything. He believes in transaction for transaction's sake. And so you can imagine a situation in which Saudi Arabia, which is ultimately more important to Trump and his family for obvious commercial reasons, if Saudi Arabia makes a demand, we'll recognize Israel if Israel does X, Y, and Z, and Israel doesn't want to do X, Y, and Z. I don't think you necessarily see a ritualized humiliation episode like you saw with Zelensky in the Oval Office, but you could. I mean, there's nothing stable about, there are no friendships. There's only the transaction, there's only political pressure. So the idea that he is, and there's a deeper problem for Israel, and it's seeming reliance, or this government's reliance on Trump, which is that if the United States continues down this path, which is to say, if the government of the United States is dismantled over time, and if our society becomes completely dysfunctional, and if our country and its leaders have a difficult time absorbing and analyzing reality, what good is a friend like that to a country? I mean, that's obviously an advertisement for Europe to go faster in building up its defense and foreign policy independence and making sure that they're not reliant on America. But this America, unless there's a reaction, as you two point out, unless there's some significant reaction, this America that we're talking about is not going to be capable of delivering safety, security, prosperity to its remaining friends in the world. So that's not necessarily what you were asking, or just a piece of what you were asking, but it's been on my mind.
So I'd like to turn to a question from the home audience. And this viewer writes in, one of my concerns is violence and the threat of violence. Many prominent voices have lost security support, and some apparently have already had to stay away from public discussion. And I would add, it seems like quite a number of members of Congress have been intimidated by all kinds of threats into supporting things that they otherwise never would have supported. George, you're the one with the finger closest to the people, it seems.
I would not.
Yeah,
I would not claim that. I would never claim that.
Yes,
I'm a lower upper middle class
about
elite.
where your fingers are.
Fingers away.
Yeah.
Violence. We've been talking about it for years. There is violence, but it's scattered political violence we're talking about. It's scattered. It has not erupted in the way our imaginations anticipate, like the movie Civil War. We haven't seen sort of militia on militia violence, and so maybe we miss the quieter, more subtle examples. But there hasn't been as much as most people expected maybe 10 years ago. Books have been written about this. And one reason there isn't violence now is because the violent ones won the election.
Power, yes.
So they don't need to be violent. They can be violent with chainsaws rather than with firearms. But will the left become violent? That's a question. I think we won't see much of that. There isn't.
Well, to be fair, we did sort of conveniently memory hold.
The problem is that I think the violent factions, this is actually so shit. I'm so curious how much of this is going to be a perfect parallel to the pre-Nazi Germany shit. The problem is that the violent factions on the left wouldn't become violent against the Trump administration, I don't think, because the violent factions on the left saw fascism and stuff like that as just like white supremacy, or I guess, I don't know, whatever, like the anti-liberal shit. Like they would never be violent, I don't think, to defend democracy. I don't know if like Antifa, at least in the United States, maybe it's different in Europe, but I don't think Antifa cares about like, liberal politics or the liberal order or democracy that they would protest. I don't know if they care as much about that. I think they care more about things like white supremacist leaders and Western colonialism. So because where is Antifa right now? Hello? Where the fuck is Antifa? Anybody?
The Scalise shooting.
There was a shooting of a congressional softball game. That was
there was a person.
Yeah, there was
Kavanaugh.
Yeah, there've been deranged people on both sides, but it's not organized, Jeff. It's not organized like on the right. You don't have men going off into the woods in order to train. At least we don't know about them. Maybe you should assign that to somebody. Are there left-wing militias beginning to form in Fairfield County, Connecticut?
No, look. The existential problem for the center left or the urban elites in America is that the other team grows all the food and has all the guns. So like that's a.
But it's not just that. It's just that the left protesters were never protesting in defense of democracy. They were protesting against like white supremacy. Like that's it.
If you're really thinking that we're heading towards civil war, and I'm not, that's a dilemma.
I think the real threat of violence that I worry about now is state violence, because they have the apparatus of the state, and if there are massive demonstrations a la summer of 2020 about whatever. It's not going to be about Ukraine. I'm sorry. I wish it was, but I don't think it will be. But it might be about people losing their jobs and losing their Social Security, their Medicaid and Medicare, whatever. Trump is sort of championing at the bit. He wants to use the military. He wants to, because that's a form of power he has.
And he has a Secretary of Defense and who will do it. And he has, maybe, we don't know, a Joint Chiefs Chairman, a new one. He fired the other one, obviously, for once mentioning the fact that black people were oppressed in the United States at one point. He took, C.Q. Brown took the radical position that slavery existed. So we don't know what he can do. We do know that this time it's not going to be shoot them in the legs. It's not going to be merely shoot them in the legs, as it was in the George Floyd protest in 2020.
I would add one other little nuance, which is George is right that we all have a kind of image in our mind of what political violence looks like. And it looks like
Antifa was obviously a Jan 6, you stupid fuck. Were they? I've watched a lot of Jan 6 stuff. Was Antifa there in any measurable way at all? I don't remember. Maybe they were. I don't remember.
the Civil War, or it looks like brown shirts in the streets, right? We all know that. Nowadays, now that people live so much online and so much of their daily experience is online, there's
that guy was trolling me.
Another form. It's not violence, but the formation of mobs and kind of mob stalking and doxing and attacks are now something that happen online. I mean, it may be that you don't need political violence of the kind we remember from the 1930s, because you have these, or you can eliminate someone from a conversation just by sicking, not just bots but real people on them. Lots of people have been scared off Twitter or run out of social media or forced to roll back what they say and think because of fear of what you can encounter online. And that's also, it's not violence, but it is a form of mob rule, and that we now have. And we now have that in every country.
Hands, please. Right here.
Hello. To return to the idea of how to get out of this mess and the obstacles to doing so, like siloing of information, excuse me, and an inability to agree on what's real, I'm wondering if you see the economy in the U.S. as being an obstacle to liberal democracy. And what I mean by that is that it seems to me that we're trending, that neoliberalism is just intensifying. We're moving toward a financialized sort of capitalism where there are huge investments in digital technology, cryptocurrency, AI. And that sort of an economic system is quite incompatible with liberal democracy. And so I'm wondering if you see that as an obstacle, and if you do, how do you think that might be overcome?
I'll just say briefly, I think actually it started earlier. So the rise of anonymous money, shell companies, anonymously purchased property, the widespread use of offshore bank accounts, the ways...
Sorry, I thought there was going to be a cringe question. That's not a cringe question. Fuck, I said it was cringe. You guys all said it was cringe. That's not. That's a good point. This is a point that I brought up a lot, that propaganda and social media are financially incentivized to show you stuff that might be bad for democracy. And there are ways to tailor algorithms or tailor programs in a way that's in front of your face more than it ever has been in the history of all of mankind, constantly, to get you to consume that type of content. Is it possible for a democracy to exist in that environment? I'm not sure.
So the rise of anonymous money, shell companies, anonymously purchased property, the widespread use of offshore bank accounts, the ways in which money flowed around the world over the last 10 or 20 years and began to accelerate, the way in which autocratic leaders, starting with Russia, who sort of invented this, began to use Western financial institutions to steal and launder money and move it around. I think a lot of that is the precursor to what we're seeing now. And in particular, there's a reason why autocracies are more secretive. We know that Putin and Xi Jinping are both very, very wealthy. They're billionaires. Some say Putin is the richest person in the world. But we have no idea where their money is, how they got it, where they keep it, how it's moved, who's controlling it right now. And that's a sign of a dictatorship. As we began to have a breakdown in transparency in our country, in the U.S., but also in Europe, by the way. And I think this is something that Europe should have paid much more attention to a lot earlier.
Yeah,
we also
Europe.
have had the growth of autocratic practices in other ways. So I do think they're connected.
And, the inauguration was revealing because it was Trump and the oligarchs. It was a strange panorama of the richest people in America and the tribute.
That's, I think the most embarrassing thing, I think, as an American, if we do have this bout of whatever the fuck this is, fascism, authoritarianism, it's probably going to be like in the future, our kids are going to be looking at us and they're going to be like, or well, I guess for me, I already have a kid, so fuck you guys in the future. It'll be like, you guys said that an oligarch is when the billionaires run and control everything and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, yeah. And then he's like, was nobody worried when all these guys who were all literally the richest people in the entire world all of them were at Trump's inauguration, and all of them were contributing millions of dollars? Wasn't that like a big red flag to you guys? And it's like, I mean, to some of us, yeah. These are like the three richest. Are these the three richest men in America? Elon is one. Zuckerberg and Bezos, are they 2 and 3? I don't know if like Tim Cook, I don't know how much Apple stock he has. Who are the 3 richest men in America? Top 5 richest men in America. Musk, Bezos, Zuckerberg. Okay. What does Larry Ellison look like? Is he one of the people standing around here somewhere? Okay, so these are the 3 richest men, yeah, in the world, I'm sorry. Maybe not America, but in the world. Wasn't that kind of weird? Yeah, you're probably right. It probably was kind of weird. The Google CEO is the Indian guy in the picture? Okay, nice. You never mentioned anything before they jumped ship and cuddled up to Trump. I'm sorry. Show me a picture that looks like this. Lone Wolf 29 on the Democrat side. I'll wait.
Of the people. And so there's an inherent flaw in the Trump project right now that he has brought into it, I think, because he's so seduced by very rich people. There's Musk and there's, I don't know whether you want to call it Vance. Bannon is, I think, too peripheral now. He makes a lot of noise, but I don't think he has a whole lot of power. But Vance is certainly someone who's been a critic of neoliberalism as a populist. How is Trump going to have both of these heads together in the same government? I think if Musk becomes the real face and engine of the Trump administration, that's going to be very bad for Trump. It's a huge liability for him with the public. Musk is not liked, and big tech is not liked. But if it's Vance, and if it's someone who gets to scapegoat Haitians while talking about the rights and the needs of the real Americans, that's a powerful message, and I think it can be one that just keeps winning. And it's both a challenge and an opening for the Democrats to figure out how not to be the party of the oligarchs.
This is the same J.D. Vance whose fortune was given to him by Peter Thiel.
It is. If you start looking for consistency in any of these guys,
you're not going to
be very frustrated. Yeah. But his posture now is the guy who has 10 generations of Vances buried in one cemetery. That's the persona he presented at the convention.
And his children will be buried there too, he told us. It's creepy.
Yeah, they will. I guess he's already got their little graves picked out.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So being mindful of where we are, I want to ask the three of you for your brief bits of advice to Europe in the age of Trump. Who wants to start? And you're nodding already.
I have many views. Europe. This is the moment when Europe needs to
save us.
In my view, there are two
Please.
things that it needs to do. One, obviously, is the thing that's beginning to happen already, which is to create a coalition of the willing around defense and security, written more broadly. So not just military security, but let's broaden and deepen the conversation about sabotage, about cybersecurity, and so on.
That cybersecurity. That thing we just said we were no longer going to investigate Russia for. Okay, the cyber intrusion stuff. Okay.
It can't happen in the EU because Hungary can block it, and also the EU doesn't have the UK and Norway, which we need. And it might not be able to happen in NATO. I don't know yet, because NATO is structured around an American leadership that may or may not be there. I don't want to eliminate it forever, but there needs to be a mechanism by which a few important things can be done. If a defense fund is raised, but also some mechanism by which European countries can either order troops or send weapons. There needs to be something created. I mean, it doesn't have to have a building. It doesn't have to have an acronym. But it has to have a real existence. And I think people do understand this. It just hasn't quite happened yet. The second thing I would say is, there's going to be, and this has started already, so I'm not saying anything that's new or surprising.
Again, and I don't know, man, maybe I'm just being an ignorant American dooming hard, okay? And my European brothers will astound me. And I'm going to say this at the risk of even being a clue of dictating to Europe how they feel. I think even Europe is delusional right now about the amount of European union that they're going to find, the amount of collaborative European efforts, in terms of forming some giant army military apparatus or coming together and agreeing on this kind of stuff. Like 2 years ago, I feel like Euro skepticism or EU skepticism was at like almost its highest point. And the idea that like the fact that Macron was able to stave off like Le Pen or other people like being able to have significant control of the government, like was being celebrated, like, oh my God, we're not destroyed yet. And now all of a sudden Europe is like, oh no, we're going to be able to do it, guys. We're definitely going to fucking do this, guys. Like, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe. I hope I'm so wrong on that. I hope that all the Europeans are linking me. They're like, you thought we couldn't do it. And look how fucking wrong you are. Okay. Everybody is working together, and they love each other. Nobody says Brussels as a slur anymore. Everybody's so happy to be part of the European Union, and we're all happy about how it functions, and we all have a joint EU army, and everybody's okay with people like France and Germany having, you know, like leadership. We're all happy with it. So fuck you, Destiny, you're wrong. I hope that's the case. I hope so. I hope so. I hope so. I really hope so.
There is going to be a joint, maybe not coordinated, but certainly a two-pronged effort to put enormous pressure on the European Union, and it's going to come from the United States, and it's going to come from Russia. And if the European Union is going to survive, it needs to think about how it will resist this pressure. I mean, personally, I think this something I've already spoken about, which is the regulation of U.S. tech companies and a deep examination of the effect that the structure of social media has on European democracy is part of that story. But there may also have to be other pieces of it. I don't know whether this has sunk in or not, but it's clear to me now that for different reasons, there will be two-pronged pressure. It will take the form of propaganda. It will take the form of economic pressure. You know, it may or may not be connected to the war in Ukraine. And you know, this is really the moment now. If people want to keep that institution, if they care about it, if they think it's brought them prosperity, this is the moment to think about how it's going to be defended, how the arguments are going to be made, and what will be done to shore it up.
George? Well, I've been here 36 hours or so, and I am sort of encouraged, actually. I had this sense of a shock, and yet maybe more than Americans, I feel that Germans are beginning to think beyond the shock. And we're still living in the shock. It's around us every day. But the Germans I've talked to, Europeans, whatever you want to say, have already begun to think, what does this mean for us? It's a clarifying moment. It's an existential moment. And that has given me a little bit of hope that this is going to be the Zeitenwende, that this time that really happens. I think the biggest challenge, and I'm talking to elites, right? I have to understand who I'm talking to. The biggest challenge will be for them to bring their publics around to an acknowledgement that Russia is a threat, that America is not to be counted on, and that their way of life, their security, their prosperity, their freedom.
Okay. Wait, link me this.